don't have a globally agreed definition of terrorism. As the ash was smouldering as the Twin Towers had fallen, Security Council meets, and in that first month they create a new resolution, UN Security Council Resolution 1373.
We have adopted a very ambitious, comprehensive strategy to fight terrorism in all its forms throughout the world.
The meeting is adjourned.
Requires them to legislate against terrorism, but there's no agreed definition of terrorism. So each state essentially has got to define what terrorism is on its own terms. And the absence of a common definition has meant that there's been this real ripeness for abuse. States get to define whomever they like as a terrorist with almost no consequence at the domestic level. And so what we're seeing around the globe is the imprisonment of civil society actors. We're seeing direct targeting, in some cases they're killing, by the permissive framework of counter-terrorism.
Misuse of counterterrorism measures against civil society is a key feature of the mandate's work. It's a priority that the Special Rapporteur set when she was appointed.
Dear teacher and the professor.
We're seeing authoritarian states especially, but also plenty of democratic states, taking advantage of the lack of a clear consensus under international law about what these so-called crimes or offenses look like.
It is using counterterrorism measures as an excuse or as a pretext to target human rights defenders and prevent them from doing their work in holding states accountable.
Governments simply using counterterrorism laws to imprison opponents, critics, dissidents.
I was arrested for 2.5 years under quote-unquote terrorism charges. And I asked what terrorist organization. He said, well, we cannot tell you the name. Secondly, you are charged of spreading rumors and lies against the state using social media networks. The whole idea of terrorism is only used against opposition, against human rights defenders, against journalists, against people who speak their mind.
In my testimony, I will illustrate the devastating impact the Prevention of Terrorism Act, or PTA as we call it, has had on human rights in Sri Lanka.
Critics say the PTA legislation is an affront to the rule of law, allowing confessions in cases which they say makes torture common.
The PTA is used as a weapon to intimidate, threaten and stifle dissent, media freedom and civil society activities. Human rights defenders are labelled as traitors and terrorists.
The pretext of counterterrorism is one of the patterns to target human rights defenders and civil society who engage with the United Nations.
I was thrown in prison, interrogated, tortured, only to figure out just because of carrying out activities like attending the Human Rights Council sessions, meeting with the UN Special Rapporteurs, just the normal activities that any human rights defender or activist would do.
Sometimes counterterrorism financing measures can have a really detrimental impact on civil society. It's another way to kind of indirectly cripple the civic space and the ability for civil society organizations to perform their legitimate activities.
A court in Uganda on Wednesday granted bail to the country's highest profile human rights lawyer, Nicholas Opio.
In the middle of a heated campaign, I was arrested. The allegations were that the organization I lead had received money that was being used to finance the political opposition and therefore was involved in money laundering. There have been many such examples of individuals being targeted. Several organizations have had their bank accounts frozen, have been the subject of criminal interrogation. Now, the purpose of doing this is not to prosecute. It is purely to interrupt your work and delegitimize these entities.
Dozens and dozens of organizations have been forcibly dissolved in Nicaragua for reasons that are linked to counterterrorism, to money laundering, and to national sovereignty. Particularly in Nicaragua, our partners are so fearful of being arrested, of being shut down, of being tortured, of being forced into exile, that they are acting anonymously.
Honourable Chair, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, it's a privilege to be here with you in person. Counter-terrorism and countering violent extremism is being used to target, constrain and attack civil society across the globe. That civil society, they are the ones who protect and insulate our societies from the conditions that produce violence. And in that,
it shouldn't always be an expert like me at the table. It should actually be a civil society voice at the table, making the case and having governments hear them.
The coalition emerged from the recognition by civil society organizations that we're bearing the brunt of the negative consequences of the counterterrorism system. We need to organize ourselves to try to respond to that and mitigate those threats.
We have been reaching out continuously to these mechanisms, and they are starting to listen.
Enabling a healthy and rich civil society environment is crucial to effective counterterrorism.
The conversations are changed if there's more room for civil society to speak to what is actually being experienced on the ground. The narrative shifts and the set of policy tools and responses we have shift.
The abuse of counterterrorism measures to target human rights defenders and civil society is absolutely unacceptable. And it also works against our security and our safety, because when you target civil society, you target the best of us.